All right, I want to bring on a guest and talk a little bit about the office of sheriff. It's one of my favorite topics, actually, and I've been involved in the office of sheriff for a long time. There was a sheriff in 2013 and 14 who was wrongly removed from office, and I looked into it and learned a whole lot about the office of sheriff. He actually the governor restored his office and found out there was a lot of wrongdoing there. And so in that process, I learned a whole bunch about the office of sheriff. The fact that it is the highest ranking constitutional constable in a county, that the sheriff even outranks the feds, and that if America has any chance to restore this republic and regain our liberty, we need to have good constitutional sheriffs. And I have a friend who also thinks deeply about these things, and he told me that the tradition of sheriff dates back to England, and he says actually the sheriff's job never changed, if you think about it. The sheriff's job is to interpose himself between the sovereign and the servants. And in England, the sheriff, the sovereign, was the king, right? And the servants, the subjects, were the people. And so the sheriff interposed himself and kept the sovereign safe, the king. And that's exactly what the sheriff's job is in America. Except the sovereign is not the king. The sovereign is the people, right? So the sheriff still should interpose himself in between the servant, the government, and the people. It's just that we flip that tortilla. And in America, the people are supposed to be sovereign. So let's bring on a candidate for sheriff in Hillsborough County. His name is Charles Boswell. Hey, Charles, welcome to the Bernie Thompson Show. Hey, I missed. Hold on there. I didn't hit the right button. Hey, Charles, welcome to the Bernie Thompson Show.
Hi, Bernie. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad to have you. I don't know if you heard my little story that my buddy told me. He's a real constitutional scholar about the sheriff interposing himself between the sovereign and the people to keep the sovereign safe. And in America, the sovereign's supposed to be the people. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
We have a mutual friend, of course, J.C. Hall and Chris Ann Hall, and they have told me a little bit about you. And I'm looking over your credentials. You've been in law enforcement for quite a while, and you are running against this is a primary that's taking place in August, and would love to hear more about you and more about why you would undertake such a big challenge as to run for sheriff.
Well, that's a great question. I think you absolutely nailed the point. A sheriff's job is to stand between the government and the people, the sovereign being the people. And here in Hillsborough County, we've seen an overreach of government power. We have a sheriff here in Hillsborough County that thought it was appropriate to arrest a pastor, violate his First Amendment privileges. We have a sheriff here who seems to oppose the Second Amendment, or doesn't see our Second Amendment is very favorable. And we've had quite a few other issues with this sheriff. We've had issues with him voting on laws, imposing laws, and then enforcing laws that he himself has helped to create. We haven't had an issue with him locking us down against our will, voting on that, and then enforcing those laws. And now we have a sheriff who had an issue with the riots and didn't seem to be able to properly prepare himself and handle the riots in the way that he should have. So we have a hodgepodge of issues with this current sheriff, and I think the people have had enough. And as a result, they reached out to me and asked me to run against him, and I am more than ready to do so.
And, of course, the sheriff in Hillsborough County, I believe, is Chad Cronister. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah, and my good friends, who I call a constitutional genealogist, the best constitutional scholar I know, Chris Ann Hall, and the best constitutional pastor I know, my dear friend J.C. Hall, they call him Red Flag Chad. They say that he is not the best supporter of the Constitution, and in particular, the Second Amendment. Will you tell us about that?
Yeah, Sheriff Chronister seemed to think it was a good idea to get a list of or look into individuals who owned guns. And frankly, that's not any of Sheriff Chronister's business. The Second Amendment gives us the rights to bear arms, and that's a God-given right per our founding fathers. And yet, Sheriff Chronister somehow thinks that he's wiser than our founding fathers and thinks it is his business to look in who owns guns. I happen to disagree with him.
Yeah, I certainly do too. And you're not new to law enforcement. As a matter of fact, your credentials are quite impressive. Over 25 years law enforcement experience. Would love to know about that. And also, criminal justice professor and legal consultant. So this is not new a new field that you're dabbling in. Tell us about your career.
Well, I did 25 years at the sheriff's office. What I'm most well known for was as a detective in the criminal investigation division. During that time frame, I served as a juvenile detective. I worked crimes against children. I was a violent crimes detective. I was a homicide detective, and for a period of time, I was on a FBI task force investigating gang activity here in Hillsborough County. And what led to my retirement was actually I opposed unconstitutional arrest where they violated a suspect's Fifth Amendment rights. I spoke out against it and later refused to testify untruthfully in court and was retaliated against. And that led to my retirement and ultimately me teaching and starting up my own business, my own consulting business. And me locking horns with the sheriff's office gave me a little bit of notoriety here in the area. So when we had a sheriff who started making some gross constitutional missteps, then naturally people reached out to me to run against him because of my stance on the Constitution.
Yeah, we're speaking with Charles Boswell, running for sheriff in the primary in Hillsborough County. And I thought it was important in anywhere in the country to hear your story, even if we're not talking directly to voters now, because what's important about the office of sheriff is important in any county, and we have 67 counties in Florida. And with respect to your race, I know how expensive it is and how painful it is to run for office. I know how difficult it is to dislodge an incumbent. Talk to us a little bit about that, the practicality of winning a race like this. It's got to be a big hurdle.
Yes, I think it can be, and I think that it is. However, I think the people are ready for a change here in this county. We've had a system here in Hillsborough County that essentially has been a monarchy for years. We really haven't had anybody challenge the sitting sheriff since 1964. And for those of you that are listening, I'll say it again, since 1964. They've handed it from one sheriff to the next. The people really haven't had a say. And with this particular sheriff, the government overreach has just become so bad, so gross, and so negligent that there's an outcry for change. And this is truly a grassroots movement, which is of the people, by the people, of the people, for the people. And they want somebody to come out and challenge this guy and remove him because of the government overreach. A sheriff, and a great point you made early on, a sheriff's duty is to stand between the government and the people. It's your first and last defense. If the sheriff isn't going to stand up to the government and say, no, you're not going to violate these constitutional rights, it comes down to you. You have to defend yourself. So you have to have a sheriff that's willing to stand up and stand against unconstitutional laws. We have a sheriff here who not only is he not willing to stand up for the Constitution, he's going above and beyond to violate the Constitution. And the people here in Hillsborough County have simply had enough.
Well, that's terrific. And I'll tell you, I love that you have 3 bullet points: restore integrity, conservative values, and bring back accountability. And the reason I say that is because when Ronald Reagan ran against Jimmy Carter, he really talked about 3 things. he had 100 stories, but he talked about three things. And it was, we're going to transcend communism. We're going to get government off our back. And we're going to get some tax relief. And you can keep more of your own money. Those were the three things. And people were able to remember that. And it mattered. And he had, Reagan, he had 1 million stories. And I think a good campaign has three major things. And restoring integrity. I called it public trust. I ran for office once, almost hurt myself, barely lost. It was probably a good thing for me. But my thing was restore public trust. If I had been elected to the city council, I'll tell you right now, the people would know what the government knows. You wouldn't need a public record request. And it scared the ever-living out of them, and it should have. And talk about restoring integrity.
Right now, we have a sheriff's office who isn't held accountable to anybody. Again, I've gone through the story of arresting pastors. One of the things that made national news is we had a sheriff who released inmates without doing background checks. That led to the murder of one of our citizens the following day. The following day by one of the inmates who had been released the day before. There's literally no accountability in this agency. With no accountability, we don't have accreditation right now in the agency. What is accreditation? Accreditation is oversight for the government. We have a $118 million budget that there's absolutely no accountability on. So let's talk about integrity, as you talked about. We have a sheriff who thinks it's appropriate to take that $118 million budget and put his name all over the cars. The sticker of Chad Cronister's name is put on all the sheriff's office cars. I would argue that that's campaigning with taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
That's when integrity comes in. You, I, the citizens of Hillsborough County, pay for that. And without integrity, you have nothing. You have to have a sheriff where you understand where he stands and what he's going to do without asking him. With Sheriff Cronister, it's obvious that he's going to spend your money on whatever he wants to spend money on. There's no oversight. There's no accountability. There's no accreditation to have that oversight. With Charles Boswell as your sheriff, you can be guaranteed that I'm not going to be spending your hard-earned taxpayers' dollars to promote myself, to campaign on your taxpayers' dollars under the guise of marking my police cars for public safety. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely incredible, and I could go on and on and on. But that's a hot topic button right now here in Hillsborough County.
And it really should be. We're talking with Charles Boswell, a candidate for sheriff running in a primary in Hillsborough County. And because I'm a big supporter of the office of sheriff, because I understand how important it is to restore this republic and regain our liberty. And, one of the things, Charles, that I get frustrated with is I see a lot of people in office with absolutely no understanding of the proper role of government. They don't know the first thing about civics, economics, or history. And they certainly don't know, oftentimes, about the job they're doing. And I often say I'm opposed to random mandatory testing of say, drugs, random mandatory testing of drugs. But I am in favor of random mandatory testing of politicians and their knowledge of the Constitution. I'm all for that. That's what I'd like to know, because they don't even know their own rule book, Charles. And when I look at your resume here, and I see that you've got a master's degree in criminal justice with a concentration in forensic science, when I see that you've got 25 years of law enforcement experience, that you're a homicide investigator, and you've done all of these things, you've got a record. You've got character and a reputation that you've established. You can point to this and say, this is who I am, not who I promised to be. And so I wish you the very best. And I want to give you a minute or so to let people know why they should vote for you in Hillsborough County. I'm going to send this to you so people can know you a little bit better.
I really appreciate that. And you just said it all. I have the experience. I have the integrity. I've worked these positions. And when you look at the career path that I took, the 25 years I was there, I took the career path of a blue-collar guy who literally had to earn my way through the ranks, had to earn my way into every single position that I made my way into. And it wasn't because I was a politician. It was because I was able to do my job. Chad Chronister's experience at the sheriff's office was vastly different than mine. Chad Chronister was a career politician within the agency. He was never a forensic investigator. He's never worked a homicide case. He's never worked a violent crime case. He hasn't done any of those things. And so what we see now is a sheriff who's unable to make sound decisions because he's never been there and done that. He's been pampered his entire career. He surrounded himself with yes men who don't know how to tell him no. And instead of telling him no, they powder his behind instead of cleaning up the mess that he makes. I'm willing to go in and clean up that mess because I have cleaned up those messes. And I'm the right guy for the times right now. There may be somebody who comes along 4 years from now that's more qualified for me than I am. I welcome that. Right now, I want the best for this county. And Chad Chronister isn't the best for this county. Right now, I'm the best choice for this county. I want to go in and clean up the mess that he has created. And again, 4 years from now, if somebody else comes along who's better suited for the position, I welcome it because I want the best for this county. And I can assure you that the next sheriff that comes in behind me isn't going to have to clean up my name off of every single patrol car to get his job started.
I really appreciate you spending some time with us. CharlesBoswell.com. Vote CharlesBoswell.com is where you can find out more. And I really urge you to take a look, even if you're not in the county, at the type of candidate I think we need in every county across America. Vote CharlesBoswell.com. Charles, I hope we can talk again soon.
Anytime. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. We'll be right back.
You're listening to The Bernie Thompson Show. More of you and Bernie straight ahead on Pensacola's only 24-hour information station, FM Talk 103.7, Talk 790 AM.